Michelle Live podcast.
My Michelle Live.
Hey, welcome to My Michelle Live as we wrap up the week and look at a week in review. Our week in review takes on some of the big issues of the week that everyone's talking about, but reports on things that are underreported, swept under the carpet, or outright, I am blown away this week, outright lied about by actual mainstream. I've gotten used to, like the lobster in the pot, of the spin doctoring, of taking the news and pulling out enough truth and maybe not reporting so much on this and editing in just a way so that we can manipulate you and help you to think the way that we think, which is something that's been going on in the news for quite some time now. What I'm not used to is outright lying about it. So we're going to talk about some issues there. We're going to take on some of the big news from Rittenhouse, the big deal with OSHA and mandates. Wow. And so much more. And we're going to take it on with our friend Adam Rizzieri. We call it the Riz Report.
Let's review the week.
So we're taking on the Riz Report today with Adam, and so glad to have you, Adam, with us today.
Always a pleasure to rock and roll and kind of review what's taking place over the course of the week, trying to make sense of things that maybe seem otherwise just totally crazy.
Here's a big crazy news story. Here's a crazy news story. We had a presidential shakeup today, and you may not have even known it.
Oh my gosh, I was holding my breath for 85 minutes straight when VP Harris had the power of President Harris. She had the codes to the nukes for 85 minutes. When President Biden went in for his pre-birthday colonoscopy. So while he was getting scoped, VP Harris was probably in there just trying to get comfortable in the chair. Because we all know her aspirations from day one have really been to be in that number one spot. You know, she doesn't care how she gets there. She doesn't care under what circumstances they might be.
Or if she can actually do it.
Or, yes, certainly that. Like, competency, what's that? I mean, frankly, she was so unfavored by her own party in the primaries. She was not even close to being a choice for president, right? Like,
do you know why that's a big deal? Because as her poll numbers have plummeted, what we're being accused of is racism and sexism, because we just don't favor her or the job that she's doing. Is there racism and sexism? You know, I think that is a card that is so overplayed. And yet, if you really want to play it, then play it both ways, because her party didn't want her either. So does that make them racist and sexist?
Well, I mean, is Joe Biden racist and sexist? Because I know during the primary, she was calling him a racist and a sexist. And now here he is. His birthday, he turns 79 years old on Saturday, the oldest president in history. This guy was born in 1942. So he was born, I guess, as an 8-year-old, 1950. That was when Venezuela as a country was the 4th or 5th most wealthy country in the world. And now look at them today. I mean, he's literally seen so much of history take place that, you know, honestly, Michelle, you could kind of almost point the finger at him and say, man, Joe, like, you know better, sir. You know much better than what's taking place today. And you know enough to know also that you could have picked a much better person to be vice president. He also could probably admit the fact that somebody else could be a better president than he is today.
Well, maybe we should look at this
as a moderate Democrat who's going to unify our country. And in fact, as a leader, as a governor, he's nothing like that at all. He's not unifying the country. He's not governing from a centrist, moderate platform at all. He's so far left. He's so far beyond, I think, what the voters of this country were expecting from him.
Is he, though? I mean, because who's really running the country? He's having competency issues, and the issue with he could have picked a better vice president. Well, that is part and parcel of where we're at in our country, where we are preaching equity instead of equality. We want equity is equal outcomes. Everyone needs to have the same outcome. equality means we all have access to the game so that we can make our own outcomes. And that means if I work harder, I should have the ability to succeed as much as anybody else who works hard. Not that if I don't do a dang thing and if I'm completely incompetent, if I don't do my job, if I'm a border czar, but I'd never even visit the border, I should be able to be president because there's not enough people who look exactly like me. That's
Because
what happens. So we're living with the consequences of our own incompetency and our own equity.
Well, that's the curse of entitlement, Michelle.
We're entitled,
right? It's the curse of entitlement versus earning something. You know, like the whole concept of meritocracy. And I know there's so much that we can kind of dig into here, but she feels literally entitled to this position because she is a female of color. When in fact there are so many other females of color that are much more qualified for this role. But a lot of them actually kind of get shut down sometimes for standing up as strong leaders. I mean, Winsome Sears in Virginia, the first lieutenant governor of that state to be a woman of color, like she is an incredibly impressive person, a first generation American who was born in Jamaica, who served in our Marine Corps and earned her way to where she is today. She earned the respect that she's given. She wasn't ever entitled to it. She earned it. And that's the kind of person
maybe even had to work harder for it. Let's just be honest. Maybe she had to work harder for it. Maybe she had to deal with misogyny, with racism. Maybe she had to. It is not systemic. If it was, she wouldn't be where she is. But what it is sometimes even inadvertently in the minds of people, because that's the way things have been. That's where people are championing critical race theory. But in reality, as we work hard and we see the spectacular ability of people, it has sometimes little to do with race or skin color. Sometimes it's just, I don't like you. You speak with a Southern accent, and I think people with Southern accents sound stupid. You're fat. Fat people get discriminated against every day. And if you're not pretty in America, you are less privileged. Studies have shown that. So there's all kinds of ways where we have to sometimes prove ourselves. That's just the way it is in America. And
Absolutely
unfortunately, because of the way we are now indoctrinating people as a white guy, you may have to prove that you're actually a good guy. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. Is it ridiculous? It is absolutely ridiculous. But that's the reality of struggle. And that's the reality of having to maybe work a little bit harder. It makes you harder working.
Right.
It makes you excellent, and eventually the cream rises to the top.
I think we can agree, Michelle, that a story of struggle is one worth listening to. And I think it's one that does make somebody much stronger as a person, right?
Come on.
I want to read that story versus the story of someone who just kind of cruised to the top by just looking a certain way or
sleeping her way, whatever it may be. Yes, I get it.
I think the quote I've heard is "Heels up, Harris," is the quote I've heard from a lot of those who have things
okay. Yeah. And what a lot of people are referring to is when she was 29 or in her late 20s, she dated a married man who started her career and, Montel Williams, blah, 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 blah. Honestly, I care little about that. Our world is messed up and people do stupid things. What I care about now is she competent, and most of Americans, including Democrats, say no. Does that make them racist and sexist? Another story that's big in the news this week is Buld Back Better, and it passed after an all-nighter.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. Yeah, so Buld Back Better passed after this all-nighter. And really it was passed along party lines. These radical, out-of-touch congressional Democrats they're so just untouched, or they're so out of touch with their voters. We're talking about now a $2 trillion spending bill, this social spending bill that really, people don't really even know what's actually in there. And this spending bill follows $6 trillion of spending since March of 2020 for COVID relief. It follows this $1.2 trillion spending bill for infrastructure, which has all sorts of, or at one point had all sorts of things in there, like let's tax people for every mile they drive. Let's build charging stations for electronic vehicles, which actually is the same concept of saying, hey, why don't we have the government build gas stations out there? These are all things that the private sector should be responsible for growing in a way that's much more intelligent and thought through than a government mandate. The real problem here with this spending bill, as well as a lot of the initiatives pushed forth by the current administration, is that they're not addressing the real problem here, which is inflation. And the public has stressed how concerned they are about inflation. It's a real problem when you see wage growth basically underpacing the rate of inflation. So, people are getting paid more maybe, but stuff costs more to purchase. So just because my paycheck looks better, those dollars aren't stretching nearly as far. Like, that's the real problem today. And so now when we look at this additional $2 trillion of spending, I mean, Build Back Better is poison for our economy right now. We're literally facing 1970s style stagflation, where we're going to have lagging growth in our economy, just lagging GDP, runaway prices. Everything's out of control. Fuel prices, food prices. So the cost of getting to work is greater. And then when I earn a paycheck, the money that I have doesn't stretch nearly as far. And so, you compound that with just the struggles of a small business, the struggles of a single parent. These are real problems. Not everybody can really weather this sort of storm. And things seem so out of control, Michelle.
We are looking at trillions and trillions of dollars. We have still not been able to wrap our heads around spending within our means. There are times in my budget where I would love to just create money out of nothing and then just spend. Whee! That would be great.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, and Americans are doing it, and that's why we are in debt in horrific ways, because we just live off of credit.
The messed up thing, though, is like how this whole thing is being sold, and it's garbage. So Biden is claiming that this whole Build Back Better initiative cost $0. He's saying, "Oh, this isn't going to cost anybody anything.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
actually not going to hurt the big guys. It's fine." The fact is okay. So the Congressional Budget Committee looked at kind of like how things are going to play out over time, and they say, in theory, if Build Back Better does work the way the Democrats say it's going to work, then it will increase the deficit by $160 billion over 10 years. But the reality is that assumes that the Democrats are going to be able to impose additional enforcement from the IRS, saying that the IRS can basically squeeze out more money from individual taxpayers who they assume are not paying the proper amount of taxes each year. That he's literally saying, let's put an IRS agent inside every CPA's office, which, first of all, that's freaking scary, but let's put one inside every CPA's office, because I think Congress is saying, I think that we can squeeze out an additional $480 billion from the taxpayers. So they're talking about increasing the amount of audits that take place. When you file your taxes, he's literally talking about having an IRS agent literally look through your taxes in a very specific way, but also, hey, wait, let's also ensure that we have access to their bank accounts so we can see where the transactions are going and when, and how much those transactions are for. You imagine what bank account in America is over $600. Almost every bank account in America is over $600.
And if they aren't, sometimes they are. I mean, just getting your earned tax credit will put you over $600. Right. So that really does mean everybody in America that has a bank account. This level of control is unprecedented in this free nation. This level of control is it should scare everyone, even if you're a Biden worshiper, even if you're a left winger. What happens when the other side is in office and they have access to all of your private information? See, that's the essence of freedom. And where every show we often talk about your worldview. Your worldview matters. If it breaks down with hypocrisy, if it breaks down if someone else were in charge, then you realize that you are championing the wrong cause, my dear, the wrong
Very
cause.
much so. In our country, we live by the concept of innocent until proven guilty. And literally the House Democrats are saying, oh, the American public, they are guilty of tax evasion. Everybody is doing everything they can to not pay what they're supposed to pay each year. They're literally assuming that you guys are not paying the proper amount of taxes. But I'm sure, if you look at a majority of Americans, everybody makes a good faith effort to do things the right way, and then you submit your taxes each year, and that's kind of how things happen. Um, so it's just like really, I think it defies the basic concept of our legal system in some respect, but our government overall, the social contract that we have between the government and the people. Because when you see how the Democrats and how people are trying to sell Build Back Better, it doesn't sound so bad.
No, we have
Hillary
Hillary Clinton. Yeah, go ahead. Hillary
right?
Clinton.
She's saying, guys, Build Back Better is historic. It's going to lower the cost of childcare. It's going to make pre-K a reality for every child in America. Build Back Better is going to invest in urgent climate action. It's going to expand Medicare. And it's also going to cap seniors' out-of-pocket drug spending. That's what this is all about. And that all sounds great, right? I think it's very easy to agree with the fact that we have huge problems with big pharma. I mean, medication and drug prices are out of freaking control. And I know that personally, and so does my wife, and so does my father. There's a huge problem there, but the private sector has to fix it. The government and the regulators have to get the heck out of that situation. The school system, education. Okay, so they're talking about indoctrinating pre-Ks with CRT, with critical race theory. They want to find a way to get 3 and 4-year-olds into schools so that they can start indoctrinating them with CRT at an early age. Nothing in Build Back Better is doing anything to recognize the fact that Americans have a choice between public school, private school, and homeschool. And there is no sort of concession for a homeschool parent or a homeschool family or a private school family. You're still paying into the public sector's Build Back Better agenda that's going to absorb and take over the education system. And it's already happening. We've seen that at the school board level. But so when you think about how Build Back Better is being sold, yeah, it sounds great. But the reality is this is kind of teeing us up for a new version of Venezuela. From a cost perspective, Build Back Better is extremely expensive. It adds so much more debt to the individual taxpayer, tens of thousands of dollars of additional debt on our shoulders individually. I mean, who pays for it all, right? It's us. Marco Rubio, he made kind of an interesting tweet about this was earlier today, but basically he said, in 1998, the new president of a rich country promised a 21st century socialism that used the nation's wealth to provide food, health, and education programs. Sounds like Build Back Better, guys. The result was an inflation crisis, production bottlenecks, and severe fiscal challenges. Ask Venezuelans how that worked out. And I made the Venezuela comment earlier because that's what Build Back Better and these crazy out of control spending programs are teeing us up for, is inflation to the point of really just total ruin. I mean, literally more than 75% of Venezuelans today live in poverty. This was literally a country that was the fourth wealthiest nation per capita when Biden was an 8-year-old. Fourth wealthiest nation in the world. And now 75% of those citizens are living in poverty. The only reason that they're able to kind of make a living for themselves now is the fact that 20% of their overall market is the black market. Like, that's how they survive.
Well, let's talk about Australia
and doing things that defy their socialist system. Yeah, Australia.
Australia is important because we are looking at the most restrictive mandates. It's gone from penal colony to free country back to a basic lockdown penal colony. We're going to talk a little bit about some big news surrounding mandates in our country and even get an update on Australia. But let's talk about what's taken place in Australia. It was a fairly prosperous nation. Now what's going on?
Right. Well, I saw that this was a video. I think I've talked about it a couple of times, but there was that guy who was kind of sneezing without covering his mouth in the elevator. He was on video in his apartment complex, and then all of a sudden there was a witch hunt for the guy. Like, who was that guy? Let's go find him. He's on news stations. People have their pitchforks out with their masks. I guess masks and pitchforks is like the new way this time of year. But in Australia, right, people are losing some of the most basic freedoms. They're losing their ability to associate with neighbors. They're losing their ability to go out and shop for groceries and food. and they're losing their ability
it's even
to earn an
worse. In
honest living
fact,
for themselves.
I'd like to play a video on this. It is astounding what's happening.
But something happened.
Today is the first full day of the New World Order.
We've got to accept that this is the New World Order.
The New World Order and the Australia we once knew is no more.
Lockdown 6 was announced on August 5.
It is no longer the land of the young and free. It is now a land of division, blackmail, coercion, discrimination, and medical apartheid. A land where movement, speech, religion, and opinion are no longer free. Protesting is illegal. Police must enforce corrupt policies to keep their jobs.
As I won't be a police officer after the end of this interview.
Police shoot protesters in the back while they are running away. Doctors and nurses cannot speak. They will lose their license.
I can't really talk about that.
People have lost their jobs because they don't want the injection. Children are missing school and attempting suicide at a high rate. We need to show our papers to go shopping.
If you want freedom, get the jab.
We can't travel across state borders unless we apply for permission to. Members of Parliament are censored and defamed.
100% of those studies. It's a conspiracy theory.
Pregnant women are arrested for a social media post.
Search warrant.
Search warrant for what?
Activists who fight for democracy are imprisoned.
At the moment, you're under arrest for incitement.
Our human rights are gone. Our human rights are gone.
It's time that we take off the COVID blinkers and look at what's happened to our once great and free country.
Australia can no longer fight for itself. We have been silenced, assaulted, blackmailed, and psychologically damaged. We tried to fight this battle alone. The government has instilled so much fear that we have lost our vigour to fight. We are a broken nation, and although we will never give up, we need your help to continue our fight. We need help from our international friends. We are seeking your support to apply political and economic pressure on our leaders to change the destructive path that we are on. That is why we are organising a worldwide protest, with Australia excluded, in support of our plight for freedom. This is an official SOS.
It's an official SOS, and this is what we're looking at, December 4th, 12 p.m., wherever you may be. And if you can find an Australian embassy or consulate, that's what they're calling for. And that the question I have for you, America, is that what you want to look like? I know that there are people saying, well, if you just take the jab, but you are actually not being informed 100%. And I found something that I did want to share that I thought was one of the best explanations of where we're at right now and why people continue to say, yeah, no, thank you to the jab. Let's take a look.
All medical interventions or experiments.
We'll start at the beginning. Here we go.
Is okay when it comes to medical interventions. You know,
What do you mean by that?
We have something called the Nuremberg Code, which grew out of the war crimes trials at the end of the Second World War. And it established the principle of free, prior and informed consent for all medical interventions or experiments. It means that if you're going to take a medicine or have some kind of procedure or participate in a trial, you must give your free, prior and informed consent. You can't be coerced. So you're allowed to be selfish when you decide what goes into your body. That is the principle of bodily autonomy. So that's a really important principle that I think we have to maintain. Beyond that, when it comes to the specifics of the COVID vaccine, we have to remember that this is a disease which mostly affects older people. The younger you are, and if you're free of comorbidities, other diseases that make the disease worse, the less benefit you get from the vaccine anyway. And there are some quite severe, potentially life-threatening side effects. They're rare, but so is it rare to die of COVID, for example, if you're under the age of 50. So people may have good reasons to be hesitant. The other thing to bear in mind, I think, is the vaccines do not prevent you getting the disease or spreading it. Public Health England data clearly show that between vaccinated and under-vaccinated groups, the case rate doesn't change. And recent UK study published in The Lancet just last week showed that it's just as transmissible. The main benefit that you get is you don't have the same disease burden, meaning that you suffer less. So you're less likely to suffer a serious disease and be hospitalized. And obviously, if you are in the age range or in the health categories where you are vulnerable to the disease, you therefore should be strongly encouraged to get the vaccination. But to my mind, there is no case for coercion. There's no case of vaccine mandates. And these people should not be losing their jobs just because they want to exercise their right of bodily autonomy.
So some things to think about.
Wow.
Really, here we are in this place. And by the way, that is Lee Jones. He's a professor of political economy and international relations on mandates and the Nuremberg Code. You have
Brilliant.
to, again, think of the logical outcome of your decisions. If they can have control over your body here, then they should have control over they can have your control over your body in other ways that maybe you're not so fond of. This is just logic 101.
Well, this Nuremberg Code is an important thing that was a direct response to the atrocities that Nazi doctors performed in concentration camps in World War II. You know, this medical experimentation on people without consent. You know, I mean, consent's a really important thing for anything that pertains to your body. And here in our country, the whole concept of my body, my choice is just out the window. You know, the far left wants to use it for all sorts of issues when it counts for them, but my body, my choice doesn't matter if it happens to be a government mandated vaccine. The hypocrisy is just rampant, and it's.
But maybe we can buy you off. I mean, we want to vaccinate kids, and so now we're giving free museum passes to kids, and
was it free joints to people in California, like
fun things, yeah. And of course, the Biden administration, 143.5 million to strengthen vaccine confidence. You know, maybe we just need re-education camps, but all of this in a time where we're still not sure what long-term effects are, but we will in 55 years, Adam.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? The Nuremberg Code is there to make sure we're not like being subjected to testing of experimental vaccines and medications and medical things. And so here's the government trying to say, oh, well, it's not experimental anymore. But when we ask, well, what the heck, like, can I see some data here, please? There's a FOIA request to the FDA to see all of the COVID data, all the COVID research. But yeah, Michelle, you were just kind of pointing to this story here that the FDA wants 55 years to process these FOIA requests. And I'm asking myself, okay, wait, you want 55 years to process the FOIA requests that basically information the public is entitled to. And in fact, the FDA already has just an internal policy, an internal code that mandates that they promptly share this type of information with us. But they want 55 years to process this FOIA request, to share information with us over a vaccine that they were pretty quick to say, hey, you know what, we're going to go ahead and give Moderna and Pfizer the license to jab people en masse. The FDA is an organization that gets billions in funding, right? They have billions and billions in funding to run their operations, but their reason here for asking for 55 years to process this, they're just like, hey, listen, guys, real quickly, can we just kind of conform to this mandate of processing 500 documents per month? They're trying to say we only have like 8 people in our office that can do this. But the FDA has an obligation to the American public to show us this information.
Pick me. How about instead of putting an IRS guru in every auditor for every accountant's office in the United States, man, you know, just saying.
Literally, so there's the FDA's own regulations, right? It's called, the reference is Title 22, subchapter F, quote, the FDA's own regulations stipulate that the agency is to make immediately available all documents underlying licensure of a vaccine. Okay, well, immediately available sounds like yesterday to me. 55 years sounds like a lifetime. You know, my sister didn't even live 55 years. She didn't live 30. So 55 years is a couple lifetimes for some people. that doesn't sound like immediately available to me at all, Michelle. So I think that we're talking about 80,000 pages worth of documentation here that is stuff that was drafted by a combination of researchers, a combination of doctors. But the FDA wants to go through this and, kind of like cross out this and blackline that and make sure that we don't get access to the full story. But guys, we deserve the full story here. This is something that we're putting into our bodies. This is something that has potentially long-term effects on us as adults or kids that we're starting to now say have to get the vaccine as well. 55
Well,
years.
now, as we move forward, it's not being over-reported, but this is a huge story that there was a judge on Friday, federal appeals court handed a victory to the opponents of the Biden administration vaccines testing mandate. They upheld an earlier stay, called the rule staggeringly overboard, and says that it likely violates the U.S. Constitution and that it likely violates U.S. federal law. It's egregious for a sitting president, no matter how you think he got into office, to violate the Constitution, violate federal law, have such an overreaching mandate with unprecedented punishment for people who do not comply with, again, something that outright violates the Nuremberg Code and bodily autonomy. This is what's happening now. OSHA has suspended enforcement of the COVID vaccine mandate for large businesses. You know, that big 100 employees or more.
That's right.
OSHA has suspended it. They're done. They're out. Now, of course, there are states like my state in Washington that do not give a damn, and they're going to do it anyway. That's a state rights issue. But as far as a federal mandate, at this point, it's gone. Your thoughts,
That was a
Adam?
crushing mandate too. I mean,
All
that's
right.
like they were literally trying to say small businesses, we're going to fine you $14,000 per violation for any unvaxxed workers that are seen not wearing a mask on the job, not submitting to weekly COVID tests. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, we were talking about him last week. That's a guy that submitted to 300 COVID tests, and he still got barbecued despite following the protocol, the NFL's protocol for unvaxxed.
Well, why
athletes.
aren't many of the players who were vaccinated and come to work sick and get other people sick, why aren't they being barbecued? That's the hypocrisy. One of the people who were at the forefront, in fact, the people who were at the forefront of all of this was the Daily Wire. And I wanted you to hear a statement from them. We'll pull it up here.
Nice.
All right. The Biden administration announced today that it's suspending the implementation and enforcement of its unconstitutional vaccine mandate for private sector employers, pending the outcome of litigation by the Daily Wire and others. This is huge news for the 80+ million American workers currently being asked to choose between their livelihoods and their bodily autonomy. It's huge news, too, here at the Daily Wire. We were the first in the nation to file suit against the administration for this tyrannical overreach. And just this week, all of the cases filed around the country were consolidated into our court, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. That puts the Daily Wire at the forefront of the fight against Joe Biden's assault on our businesses, our bodies, and our private health decisions. But here's the thing. This victory won't mean anything to American workers unless businesses nationwide also stop enforcing and implementing the mandate. If you run a business and you've spent the last few weeks preparing to go along with the Biden plan, I get it. The government has brought enormous pressure to bear, and the fines that they're threatening for noncompliance are staggering. They could break any company. But here's the thing. Unless you're a government contractor or subject to the healthcare worker vax requirement or some other local or state policy, none of that is actually in play at the moment. Until the Sixth Circuit or the Supreme Court rules otherwise, the OSHA mandate is now off. No vaccine requirement, no testing requirement, no masks, no fines, nothing. You don't have to do anything. So don't do the dirty work for the government. Make them have to.
Don't do the dirty work for the government.
Yeah. Hats off to Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring's company over there, the Daily Wire, for putting their money where their mouth is. You don't have to agree with everything those guys say. And I think they say a lot of very intelligent things, but hats off to them for joining the fight alongside several other states' attorney generals. I know the attorney general in Missouri was kind of one of the guys that really started this legal battle against this ridiculous mandate. So thank goodness for, 100 employees is still a small business. Small business is defined by the SBA up to, I think, 250 employees or so. So, small business can be, it can be truly a small, like mom and pop shop or a company of 20 or so, more my size of a business, or it could be like a freaking massive 250 size business that all of a sudden you're finding now is having to split up different parts of the company to run operations without having to conform to these ridiculous mandates. But the interesting thing I think in that story from the Daily Wire was him pointing out the idea of, okay, now OSHA is refusing to be a puppet in this game. OSHA is refusing to be the one with the hammer doing what you say to do. You look to Australia, right? The police over there are following unjust orders. They're following corrupt political decisions and imposing terrible things on the people over there. Here in our country, a lot of our police are not doing that. They are choosing to not show up to work, to not get the vaccine. A lot of our first responders now, you have departments and you have firehouses that are understaffed and can't serve the ranks because their leadership is flawed, and they know their leadership is flawed, and they want to continue to serve the community, but they don't want to take your rights from you. So thank God for that.
Yeah, and we're seeing the first wave of military personnel that are going to be disenfranchised from the military. It's inane. It is absolutely inane. When we do have testing, we should be putting emphasis on T-cell testing. Your vaccine, we know, does not protect you. You're just being selfish. You're so selfish. Well, first of all, I have the right to be selfish. And isn't that what you people were pushing all along when you champion killing innocent babies within the womb? Because you have the right to be selfish, even though you 100% know you're taking another human life. If I don't take the vaccine, there's no guarantee I'm going to be spreading it. Now, interestingly enough, that whole argument is gone because now we know you take the vaccine, you can still get and spread the virus. The only reason for taking the vaccine is because it could lessen, and it has been shown to lessen some of the effects of COVID. So that's pretty selfish as far as I'm concerned, because now you're just walking around, I can get it, I can spread it, but it's not going to be bad for me. The other issue that we're having with it is that we don't know what's going to happen down the road. There are people who have problems with clotting. There are new symptoms that are coming out with the vaccine and new ones that come out every single month. Oh, wow. There's these. Are they mild? Are they serious? We don't know. This is where we're at in our illogical, unbendable, undebatable society. And we're being outright lied to by the press, not just hiding information, not just spinning information, but outright lying and using deceptive practices. And we've seen this in the biggest story of the week, the Rittenhouse trial.
Actually, Michelle, I just got breaking news just shared with you by my number one assistant ever in the world, my wife. She passed me a note. Breaking: Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty on all charges.
Whoa!
And guess why he's not guilty on all charges? Because a fair jury looked at the evidence, and there was significant and a lot of video evidence for what happened there. Speaking of a corrupt media, right, and corrupt mandates, how about a corrupt DA who brought a politically charged case to the court without evidence to substantiate anything to the effect of a angry white male with a gun going to shoot up a crowd of heroes as described by the DA? In fact, we have a politically charged district attorney's office, a guy that has aspirations to be a Democrat operative, arguing this ridiculous case that made him look like a very small person of low intellect, kind of fighting a really pathetic I guess legal battle that was supposed to be on a position of racial justice. Yeah, this white 17-year-old who shot 3 white dudes, one of them being a freaking pedophile, the other one holding a gun to his head, and then the other one trying to come down on him with a skateboard. Like this was such an open and shut self-defense case to me. To see how MSNBC tried to intimidate the jury. This was on I think after the third day of deliberations. You literally had an MSNBC producer in a car chasing the jury van, running through a red light, being pulled over by the police, and the guy basically saying, "No, sir, I've actually been instructed by my bosses at MSNBC to follow this jury and photograph them."
Yeah.
Jury intimidation, man, that's a part of a corrupt system. It's not what we can allow to take place in our government. And when I think back to the Chauvin trial, you had freaking Maxine Waters going to I guess the courthouse to stir up a bunch of people who were ready to wage violence if the outcome, if the verdict was not guilty.
Yeah. Is this inane? I thought you might find it interesting to hear from the judge on some of the outlandish practices of the media. And what I would like you to think about as being a longtime media girl is the way the press behaved is what we used to ascribe to those gossip reporters, the kind that chased down Princess Di and caused her accident in the tunnel. This paparazzi, ridiculous nature of let's just get this story, not traditional reporting. Where is good reporting anymore? This is what the judge had to say.
And I think it's shameful, some of the things that are being done to these people. And I when I talked about problems with the media when this trial started, we're there in part, not fully, but in part because of grossly irresponsible handling of what comes out of this trial. I will tell you this. I'm going to think long and hard about live television of a trial again next time. I don't know. I've always been a firm believer in it because I think the people should be able to see what's going on. But when I see what's being done, it's really quite frightening.
It is quite frightening. It's quite frightening. That's where we're at.
I definitely understand his position. I think the ability to have public visibility on a trial is incredibly important. Maybe you don't allow the mainstream news stations in there, but like Congress has C-SPAN, right? Like C-SPAN just has a very unimpressive view of what's taking place within the chambers of Congress. I think we still have to allow a certain level of video access that the public can see. Especially, of trials of substance like this, trials like the Chauvin trial, and then maybe even the Ahmaud Arbery trial as well, which I think is probably a little bit more, frankly, newsworthy when it comes to any sorts of attempt to argue some sort of vigilante perspective. That case strikes me as one that might actually have more weight to it if you're trying to say that there was something racially charged involved. This Rittenhouse trial, man, what a joke. It's a freaking joke that was perpetrated by a very political.
You have a kid that looks like a Boy Scout that you really don't see him.
President Biden
even
was
lifting his
a white
voice.
Supremacist.
Yes, he did. So guilty
Ayanna
before
Pressley
proving innocent.
Ayanna Pressley. Here's a tweet of Ayanna Pressley saying, she says, a 17-year-old white supremacist domestic terrorist drove across state lines armed with an AR-15. He shot and killed 2 people who had assembled to affirm the value, dignity, and worth of Black lives. Fix your damn headlines. That's Ayanna Pressley tweeting. So you have literally political officials like Ayanna Pressley and President Biden calling this kid a white supremacist when in fact he was offering first aid to people that were hurt, whether they were black or white. Didn't matter to him. He was there just to protect property, and in fact he did.
And he had a firearm, which is what, and he used a firearm the way you use a firearm if you're going to have a firearm. If we are going to allow firearms in our country, you use it for self-protection. When you feel that your life is in danger. These tweets and these comments from elected officials before we have had a chance to have someone have their day in court is irresponsible on the highest level. And in my opinion, that's on the light side. If we really want to get to what it is, it's usurping the judicial branch of government. It is absolutely stepping in and usurping the judicial branch of government because suddenly you get to be the judge, the jury, and even in some cases the executioner. Then we have back to the media. I wanted to show you just an example. Now, we've all gotten to see, if we paid attention, the Rittenhouse trial, which, if you're just tuning in, not guilty on all counts. No surprise there. Come on.
I bet he's going to be rich, by the way, too. I want to see civil lawsuits against President Biden, against MSNBC, CNN. That kid's gonna be
and
rich.
let's talk about CNN, Joe Scarborough, who said this. I'll just let you hear it, and then you can comment. Listen to what he said.
Here we have a 17-year-old kid, underage, said he bought an AR-15 because he thought it was cool. He drove across state, had his mother drive him across state lines. He appointed himself a militia member. He goes around and he ends up unloading, 60 rounds, kills 2 people, wounds a third person, and he ends up unloading 60 rounds, kills, and he ends up unloading 60 rounds.
Yeah, I'll say it one more time.
God.
60 rounds.
That's the news. That's not that is news reporting right there. No, he didn't say he was going over as a militia member. No, he did not unload 60 rounds. We saw the video. Do you know how much 60 rounds he would have had to change out his magazine? Well, I know how many times.
2 30-round mags, and it takes several minutes to fill that up. I know I have 30-round magazines. 60 rounds is a full reload. He actually, during the trial, the district attorney was trying to go through the process of re-racking a firearm like that. And they were demonstrating how you do it. You literally have to drop the magazine, put a new one in there, and then pull back the action to rechamber the weapon. It takes time. It would be very easy to see on video. And as much video as there was, I mean, very clearly, less than 30 rounds were fired. He didn't reload the firearm at all.
And yet,
so there were less than 30 fired.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's MSNBC. Another reason they should have been barred long before this. I'm going to play it and I'm going to show it. I just played it last time. This, to me, is egregious.
Here we have a 17-year-old kid, underage, said he bought an AR-15 because he thought it was cool. He drove across state, had his mother drive him across state lines. He appointed himself a militia member. He goes around and he ends up unloading 60 rounds, kills 2 people, wounds a third person.
It's
Here
ridiculous.
we have
and that is where it was outright lies. It wasn't just they have access to all the information that we have and then some. And yet they utilized this to report something that was unequivocally untrue. It would have been powerful enough to just report the truth.
They're trying to position him as like this crazy, like white supremacist kid, when in fact he was a guy he was a junior cadet in his local fire department. He's not somebody that has showed up to a violent scene. He's someone that had tried to kind of put himself through a junior level of basic first aid training so he can kind of respond to basic flesh wounds and things like that. He's someone that had a history of trying to serve his community, and he had aspirations to eventually do so, either as a firefighter or a policeman or a paramedic. He wanted to kind of fill that sort of public service role. And I think
the media was irresponsible while you could say, and I have no problem with them saying, yeah, he crossed state lines, but report the whole story. It's 17 to 20 minutes from his house. That's like me going from where I live to downtown Seattle.
Absolutely.
It is also true that his father lived there. So it is part of his community. If you think of the people during, the summer of love that they called it here in Seattle with the autonomous zone, there were people from all over the state and even out of state who consider Seattle part of their greater community. They came here to protest. Brett Hume weighed in. You sent me this tweet.
Yeah. I love what Brett Hume's contribution was. And this was basically him responding to Ayanna Pressley's ridiculous tweet. And he basically said, Rittenhouse is white and 17. Everything else in this tweet from a member of Congress is false, yet the tweet remains up. Hey, at Twitter, I thought you were policing false claims.
Ooh,
well, just throw Twitter in that bucket of corrupt media, right? And corrupt, the same bucket as the corrupt district attorney, Thomas Binger.
To kill Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Well, what a garbage lawyer. And I think because of all this ridiculousness, that's why
America did that.
I believe Kyle Rittenhouse is going to be more wealthy than Nick
entire-
Sandman from Covington Catholic, who had a massive payout from CNN after that whole ridiculous debacle that tried to smear his character as a freaking teenager. Rittenhouse, I think, is going to be maybe twice as wealthy as now Mr. Sandman, who's now a rich kid.
But I wouldn't wish anybody having to go through all of that in order to achieve wealth. Well, it's really sad.
You had Joy Bayer on The View making fun of this kid for the way he was expressing and describing the situation that he lived through. I mean, he's going to have PTSD for a long time.
Oh, dude, so did LeBron James. And what I find funny about that is LeBron can't fall down on the basketball court without crying like a baby and practically wetting himself. Forgive me if you're a James fan, but dude, come on. What
he's got worse acting than a Champions League like soccer player, you know? the way he falls on the court is just ridiculous, LeBron. I mean, man, and I don't want to be like Laura Ingraham, who's just shut up and dribble. Like, I don't want to be like that guy, because I think that if personalities have an intelligent thing to say, they should say it. But LeBron James
it's called free speech, Laura. I'm sorry. It's called free speech, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're going to free speech in a public venue, be ready for the outpouring. I have to. I have all kinds of comments that come up. That's fine. It's called free speech. If you can't take it, don't dish it out.
My grandpa's not around anymore, but God rest his soul. But he had this saying, and it sounds like LeBron James is suffering from a case of what my grandpa would say is cranial rectal inversion syndrome. He's speaking out of his rear end and not using his head. So, you know.
So is the media in this case, and this is a CNN. This is the CNN issue I was talking about. Now, my friends, I would like for you, I don't care where you are on the political aisle, to recognize that when you speak one thing out of one side of your mouth, and then when something happens just like what you were talking about, but it's from the other end of the aisle, and then you're complaining and bitching about it, well, you're a hypocrite. So this is, I don't even know what I can say about this other than take a listen.
Entitlement, when people believe that this is how they're supposed to be. What the right is saying about Kyle Rittenhouse is that, well, the government didn't do its job, so it took a 17-year-old kid to come in and do what was right. That's vigilantism. That's not what people are not supposed to be vigilantes. We're not supposed to be.
Whoa. Okay. Where were they saying? And I'm not finished with this yet. I want you to hear the rest of this. But where were they saying this? These same three that you see on your screen, where were they during the Summer of Love? Where were they during the Black Lives Matter riots? Where were they during these very riots that they're complaining that what the heck was Kyle Rittenhouse doing there anyway? I don't know. What the heck were people burning down buildings, blowing up cars, and lighting dumpsters on fire? Let's listen to the rest.
Supposed to be taking justice into our own hands. Imagine if every single person in America did that.
Okay.
Justice into our own hands. Imagine if every single person in America did that. Imagine if you call for black men or just black folks to be armed and go out on the streets and, do what they think. Justice.
Imagine, what would that look like? I don't know. 2020?
Get back. Remember, and what they did to you and slavery, whatever. Go and take things and do. Imagine if people were condoning that.
Yeah, imagine.
Is this guy serious?
Yeah.
These are the people that were basically working on the bailout fund for these rioters. These are not heroes. These are rioters. These are not the people that were a part of the Civil Rights March. That's not at all what's going on out there.
You can't make this stuff up. I am not kidding. That was real. That was 100%. You can't just go out there and take justice into your own. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. What the heck?
My gosh. like when we start listening to quote truth from people like Joy Reid, it's just that just really kind of like it's like an extra level of just ridiculous and stupid. It's like, do you have to be like, does it take intelligence to sound that stupid, to sound that dumb? Does it take intelligence to spin a story that terribly? Why does it seem like most people who think with just basic common sense are able to understand that what these people at MSNBC and CNN are saying is just bogus? And that's why their ratings are so low right now. That's why nobody's watching them. And thank God for that.
I'm watching them just so that I can make fun of them, because the few that do watch and do believe that regurgitate, vomit up this ideology and it is absolute intolerance. We're at a place where we can listen to. I don't have any problem with people talking about stuff like that. I have a problem with the media who has a responsibility to report on an issue. You give this side, you give that side, you give all of the information. It's not about editorialism, but if you pick up a paper, it's editorialism from front to back. That's not okay. If someone's side is ridiculous, dangerous, white supremacist, or any of the name calling that we ascribe, Adam, then it proves itself out. We can see that. It's obvious.
Once upon a time, the best news anchors took pride in the fact that it was hard for the public to guess whether they were left or right.
Damn straight.
Once upon a time. And now it's so obvious now. Like there's no room for question at all, because the news is not covered objectively. And now you literally see this was a headline that I came across earlier in the week, and forgive me, I didn't include it here, but it was the fact that there is now training going through newsrooms saying that journalism should not be objective, that in fact journalism should literally come with a bias behind it. And that is pure
and
garbage,
it's not
frankly.
Journalism. And I will tell you, you may have heard this story before, but if you're new to My Michelle Live, I've been in the media doing this type of either talk show or news writing or reporting for all of my adult life. I used to get praised because I would report on the story, and it felt great that you could report the story and not let your personal passion, no matter how strongly you feel about it, be known, as Adam was mentioning. One day, this is where it all changed for me, where my heart was irreparably broken, and it's only gotten worse since. When my manager walked in, the editor, and he read a piece to me that I had written, and he said, "This is great writing. It's fabulous." And my little eyes lit up because I was real young and I was trying to improve my craft. He said, "However, if you write it like this and you change the words like this, you can help people think like this." What? Are you kidding me? We want people to think like this. Yeah, this candidate's coming to town and you want them to think this so that they'll vote the right way. Who the living hell are you to say what is right and what is wrong? You're the news. And when you have a news that has no integrity, you're not following truth anyway, because truth has integrity. There is an ultimate right and an ultimate wrong. Without God, there really isn't. It's just all subjective anyway. So if it's subjective, there is no truth. If there's a God, there's a truth. And in both cases, integrity should rule the day. What the heck? And that's where we're at today. And so as we wrap up our program today, I'd like you to investigate your truth. I don't care how true you think your truth is. I don't care if, like me, you're a faith person and you believe in the absolute truth of the gospel, the Bible is an inerrant word of God. God's not afraid of you challenging that. He says, "Come, let us reason together." So even if God is even okay with that kind of challenge, who is MSN, MSNBC, CNN, the White House? Who are they to say this is truth? It is unchallengeable. Science is challenge. Science is taking an issue and saying, I don't care how ridiculous it is, bring it in. Let's just investigate it and let's see how the facts play out. That is what truth is. So I am challenging you today to not be a coward. Take whatever your deepest held truth is, investigate it as hard as you can, try to disprove it, see how well it stands up, because I will tell you in the end, the truth will set you free. And to me, that's what we get to every episode of My Michelle Live. We look for the God story, the truth, because the truth does set you free. Adam Rizzieri, you can find him at Agency Partners Interactive. You can also get a link at My Michelle Live where you'll be able to see this and so much more. Join us. Adam, thanks. You have a great weekend, my friend.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
For more fun, go to MyMichelleLive.com.